Have you ever seen a father sit across from his daughter in court with eyes full of greed instead of sorrow? Have you ever heard a lawyer warn a man not to read the last line if he wanted a way out? I watched a single sentence in a will trigger a trap my dad never saw coming. Here is how I walked in as a beneficiary, but left with the truth that cost him absolutely everything. My name is Athena Blackwood. I am 29 years old, and I was currently sitting inside the sterile, mahogany-paneled stomach of the Bryer County Courthouse, trying to remember how to breathe. The air in here was recycled and stale, smelling faintly of floor wax and old anxiety. It was a smell I would forever associate with the back of my father's neck. Gregory Blackwood sat less than 3 feet away from me. To anyone watching from the gallery, we might have looked like a family in mourning, united by grief and legal formalities. Gregory was wearing his best navy suit, the one he saved for board meetings and funerals of people he needed to impress. His hair was silver at the temples, a distinguished touch that he curated carefully at a salon that cost more than my monthly rent. He sat with a straight back, projecting the image of the grieving, responsible patriarch. He looked like a man who was burdened but strong, ready to shoulder the weight of the world for his poor, incapable daughter. But I knew the truth. I was not looking at a father. I was looking at a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Or at least, that was what he believed. He leaned in toward me, invading my personal space with a familiarity he had not earned in 2 decades. The scent of his cologne washed over me, expensive and cloying. It was the same scent he wore when he left my mother. "Athena," he whispered, his voice low and vibrating with a false warmth. "Listen to me. Once the judge is done with the preamble, I need you to sign the transfer papers. I have them right here in my briefcase. It is just a formality." His hand hovered near his leather bag, ready to produce the documents that would strip me of everything my grandfather had left me. "It will save us months of probate," he continued, his lips barely moving, a ventriloquist throwing his voice so the judge would not hear. "You do not want the government taking 40%. Do you? I have set up a trust. I will manage it for you. You just need to sign, and you can go back to your little life. I will take care of the heavy lifting." I stared at the side of his face. I watched a small vein pulse in his temple. He was so confident. He truly believed that I was still the little girl who waited by the window for a car that never came. He thought I was the teenager who craved a crumb of his validation. He thought I was weak. Under the heavy oak table, my hands were clenched so tight my knuckles were white, but I did not look away. I looked at him like one looks at a stranger on the subway who has started shouting for no reason, beside me. Lila Grant shifted in her chair. My lawyer was a woman made of sharp angles and sharper intellect. She did not whisper. She wrote a note on her legal pad and slid it explicitly into my line of sight, blocking my view of my father. "He wants you to sign over custody of the assets before the court officially grants them to you. If you sign, it is a voluntary gift. The court cannot protect you then." Lila leaned in, her voice a steel wire wrapped in velvet. "Do not touch a pen, Athena. He is trying to bypass the ruling. He knows if the judge finalizes the will as written, he has no legal standing to touch a dime. He wants you to give it to him before the gavel hits." I nodded essentially imperceptibly. "I know," I murmured. "Good," Lila said, straightening her blazer. "Eyes front. Do not let him see you sweat." The Honorable Judge Harrison cleared his throat. The sound echoed through the high-ceilinged room like a thunderclap, silencing the low murmur of the clerks and the shuffling of papers. He was an older man with thick glasses and a face that had seen every variety of human greed Bryer County had to offer. He looked tired. "We are here regarding the estate of the late Walter Blackwood," Judge Harrison said, his voice dry. "I have reviewed the petition filed by Mr. Gregory Blackwood, contesting the validity of the decedent's final will and testament. Citing undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity, Gregory nodded solemnly, playing his part to perfection. Beside him sat Tessa, his wife of 5 years. Tessa was wearing a black dress that was tastefully cut, but perhaps a shade too tight for a somber occasion. She had a handkerchief in her hand that she had not used once. Her eyes were not red from crying. They were darting around the room, assessing the value of the woodwork, the clerk's watch, and finally resting on me with a look of pure calculation. She was not seeing a stepdaughter. She was seeing a walking, talking bank account that needed to be liquidated. The court takes these allegations seriously, the judge continued. However, the decedent was meticulous. Mr. Walter Blackwood updated his will 20 months ago and included a videotaped affidavit of his mental state, certified by 2 independent psychiatrists. I felt a surge of pride. That was Grandpa Walter. He never did anything halfway. He knew this day would come. He knew his son better than anyone. Don't trust people just because you share blood. Athena, Grandpa used to tell me, usually while we were sitting on the porch of his cabin, watching the rain fall over Cedar Hollow, blood is just biology. Presence is a choice. Trust the people who show up. Gregory had never shown up. But now, here he was, showing up when there was $4,850,000 on the table. Mr. Blackwood, the judge addressed my father, you are insisting on proceeding with this contest. You are claiming your father was not in his right mind when he left the bulk of his estate to his granddaughter. Gregory stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a practiced, smooth motion. Your Honor, I say this with a heavy heart. My father was confused in his final years. He was vulnerable. Athena is a lovely girl, but she has a history of instability. I believe she took advantage of an old man's loneliness to cut out his own son. I am simply trying to rectify a mistake and ensure the family legacy is managed by responsible hands. Responsible hands, Lila repeated under her breath, a scoff that was barely audible. I felt the anger rising in my chest. Hot and acidic, instability. That was the narrative he had been spinning for years. If I got upset because he missed my graduation, I was emotional. If I cried because he forgot my birthday, I was dramatic. Now, he was weaponizing my normal human reactions to his neglect to paint me as mentally unfit to inherit my grandfather's legacy. Judge Harrison peered over his spectacles. Mr. Blackwood, I must remind you that the will contains a specific no contest clause, a very aggressive one. It is also known as an in terrorem clause. I am aware of standard clauses, Your Honor, Gregory said dismissively, but surely, the court sees that this situation is unique. The distribution is highly irregular, leaving a multi-million-dollar estate to a 29-year-old with no financial experience. It screams manipulation. The clause, the judge interrupted, his voice hardening, states that if any beneficiary challenges the validity of this will and loses, they forfeit any and all gifts they would have otherwise received. I am fighting for what is right, not for the money. Gregory lied. He lied so easily it was terrifying. I am willing to take that risk because I know my father would not have done this if he were sane. The judge looked at Gregory for a long moment. It was the look a teacher gives a student who has just given a wildly incorrect answer with absolute confidence. Very well, Judge Harrison said, but there is more. The document instructs that in the event of a formal legal contest filed by you specifically, Mr. Gregory Blackwood, I am to read the final addendum, the last line, as Mr. Walter Blackwood referred to it. I frowned. The last line I had read the will. Lila had read the will. We knew about the assets, the house, the stocks. We knew about the $1,000 left for Gregory, but I did not remember a specific addendum that was conditional on a lawsuit. Lila stiffened beside me. She quickly flipped through her copy of the dense legal text. It is sealed, she whispered to me. Page 42. To be unsealed only by the presiding judge in the event of a contest filing by Gregory Blackwood. My heart hammered against my ribs. Grandpa Walter had left a trap that only sprang if Gregory's greed pushed him this far. I have the unsealed page here, Judge Harrison said. He picked up a single sheet of paper that had been kept in a separate, thick envelope. The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed, a low drone that felt incredibly loud. Gregory looked unbothered. He smirked at Tessa. He probably thought it was a lecture, a final scolding from the grave. I am disappointed in you, son. He could handle disappointment. He had been ignoring Walter's disappointment for 40 years. He could weather a few mean words if it meant getting control of the money. The judge adjusted his glasses. He looked at the paper. Then, he stopped. He did not speak. He did not look up. He just stared at the page. 1 second passed. 2 seconds passed. It was an uncomfortable, heavy silence. The judge's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. His mouth tightened into a grim line. It was the reaction of a man who had just read something explosive. It was not a scolding. It was something else. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said, and his voice was different now. It was not dry anymore. It was sharp, cautionary. "Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed with this contest once I read this into the record? It becomes public knowledge. There is no sealing it back up." Gregory waved his hand impatiently. "Read it, Your Honor. Let us get the theatrics over with so we can discuss the competency hearing." "This is not theatrics," the judge warned. "This is a directive." I watched my father. He was so arrogant. He was so sure that he was the protagonist of this story. He thought he was the smart businessman dealing with emotional simpletons. He had no idea he was standing on a landmine. The judge looked at me. For a brief second, his expression softened. It was a look of pity, or perhaps respect. Then he looked back at Gregory, and the hardness returned. "Very well," Judge Harrison said. He turned the page. The sound of the crisp paper turning was loud in the quiet room. Cert. It sounded like a trigger being pulled. It sounded like the hammer of a revolver clicking back. My hands were shaking. What had Grandpa done? What was so terrible that he hid it behind a legal firewall? I looked at Gregory. He was checking his watch. He was bored. "Proceed," Gregory said. And in that moment, I realized that my father had made the last mistake of his privileged, selfish life. He had underestimated Walter Blackwood one too many times. The judge took a breath, looked straight at Gregory, and began to read. But to understand the gravity of what happened next, to understand why the color was about to drain from my father's face, and why Tessa would physically recoil from him in the next 30 seconds. You cannot just start here. You cannot understand the end without understanding the beginning. To understand why a dead man's words could destroy a living man's life, you have to go back to the town of Cedar Hollow. You have to go back to the days when I was a little girl waiting on the front porch. You have to understand exactly how Gregory Blackwood disappeared from my life, and how Walter Blackwood became the only father I ever knew. The gavel was about to fall, but the verdict had been written 20 years ago. Cedar Hollow, Vermont, was the kind of town that looked beautiful on a postcard, but felt isolating if you did not have a tribe to call your own. It was a place of pine forests, steep driveways, and winters that seemed to last for 6 months. There was exactly one person in my tribe. I grew up in a cabin that smelled permanently of cedar wood, old paper, and the strong, dark coffee my grandfather brewed every morning at 5 o'clock. It was not a sprawling estate. It was a practical home built by practical hands. The floorboards creaked in a specific sequence that I memorized by the time I was 7, and the windows rattled when the wind came down off the mountain. It was the safest place on earth, and it was the fortress where Walter Blackwood turned a frightened, abandoned little girl into a woman who could stand in a courtroom without shaking. My memories of my father, Gregory, from those early years are not really memories of a person. They are memories of a space where a person should have been. He left shortly after my 5th birthday. The divorce was finalized in a flurry of paperwork that I was too young to understand, but I understood the suitcases. I understood the way the engine of his car sounded as it idled in the driveway. He did not crouch down to hug me. He did not cry. He looked at me with the distracted air of a man checking his watch, worried he might miss a flight. "I will call you. Athena," he had said. He patted my head like one would pat a neighbor's dog. "I will call you on Sunday." I spent that Sunday sitting by the beige rotary phone in the hallway. I sat there for 6 hours. I traced the pattern of the rug with my finger until the skin was raw. The phone never rang. It did not ring the next Sunday, either. By the time I was 8, the silence was no longer a surprise. It was a baseline. Gregory had moved to the city, chasing deals, chasing women, chasing a lifestyle that had no room for a daughter with scraped knees and messy hair. Walter stepped into that silence not with grand declarations, but with presence. He was a man of few words and deliberate actions. He was in his 60s when he took over raising me full-time, an age when most men are looking to retire to Florida and play golf. Instead, Walter was learning how to navigate the complex social hierarchy of the Cedar Hollow Elementary School PTA. I remember the first parent-teacher conference. I was in the 3rd grade. The room was filled with young mothers in yoga pants and fathers in business casual attire who had rushed over from their offices, and there was Walter, wearing his flannel shirt and work boots, holding his hat in his rough, calloused hands. He looked like a giant among them. The other kids whispered. They asked if he was my dad. I remember grabbing his hand, my small fingers disappearing into his palm, and saying loudly, "That is my grandpa. He is the boss." Walter did not just attend the conferences. He sat in the front row at the holiday concerts, his face stoic, but his camera recording every off-key note I sang. When I caught the flu and my temperature spiked to 103 degrees, he did not hire a nurse. He sat by my bed for 2 nights straight, changing the cool washcloths on my forehead every 20 minutes, whispering stories about his time in the Navy to distract me from the chills. He did not try to be a mother. He did not try to be a father. He was simply the captain of our little ship, and he made sure I knew how to sail. His love language was competency. He believed that the world was a harsh place and that sending a child out into it unprepared was a sin. When I turned 10, he stopped giving me an allowance. Instead, he gave me a ledger. It was a small black notebook with red lines. "Money is not magic. Athena," he told me, sitting at the kitchen table with his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Money is a tool, like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use it to smash your own thumb. The hammer does not care. You have to be the one who cares." He taught me how to budget. If I wanted a new bicycle, I had to log my chores, calculate my earnings, and project how long it would take to save up. When I finally bought the bike, 3 months later, I rode it with a sense of ownership that no gift could ever provide. He taught me to spot a liar. We would watch television commercials together, and he would mute the volume. "Look at his eyes," Walter would say, pointing to a salesman pitching a used car. "He is smiling with his mouth, but his eyes are calculating. Never trust a man who smiles when there is nothing funny happening." He made me read contracts. When I was 16 and wanted my first cell phone, he printed out the entire terms of service agreement. It was 40 pages long. "I am not reading this, Grandpa," I had groaned. "Nobody reads this." "You are somebody," he replied sternly, "and you will read it. You will tell me what Section 4, Paragraph 3 says about data privacy, or we are not going to the store." It took me 3 hours. I hated him for it at the time. I sat there fuming, highlighting lines about arbitration and liability, but by the end of it, I understood what I was signing. I understood that the company owned my data. I understood the game. Walter did not believe in shielding me from the reality of labor. While Gregory was presumably dining in 5-star restaurants, I was working at Miller's Feed and Supply on the weekends. I hauled 50-pound bags of dog food. I swept the loading dock. I learned that money represented hours of your life that you traded away, so you better not waste it on things that did not matter. "You do not need me to rescue you," Walter would say when I came home exhausted. "You are building a spine. It will hold you up when I am gone." But Gregory did not disappear completely. That would have been too simple. He existed on the periphery, a ghost who showed up once or twice a year to haunt us with his wealth. He would arrive in a leased luxury sedan, wearing a suit that cost more than Walter's truck. He would breeze into the cabin, filling the space with his loud voice and his restless energy. He never asked about my grades. He never asked about my friends. He asked if I liked the gift he had brought. It was always something expensive and impersonal. One year it was a designer handbag that was completely impractical for a teenager living in rural Vermont. Another year it was the latest gaming console, even though I didn't play video games. He was trying to buy his way out of guilt. He thought if the price tag was high enough, it would cover the cost of his absence. I would take the gifts. I would say thank you. And then I would watch him leave, feeling emptier than before he arrived. It is a strange pain, having a father who is physically present but emotionally vacant. It is like standing in front of a fire that gives off no heat. There is one memory that stands out, clear as a photograph. I was 17. It was a Tuesday night in November, and the wind was howling outside. I had come downstairs to get a glass of water. The lights were off in the hallway, but the light from the kitchen spilled out across the floorboards. I heard voices. "I just need a bridge loan." "Dad?" Gregory's voice was tight, desperate. "It is a sure thing. The development in Florida is going to pay out 10-1. I just need $50,000 to cover the permits." I froze in the shadows. I peered around the doorframe. Gregory was pacing the small kitchen. He looked frantic. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled. Walter was sitting at the table, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea. He looked calm, immovable as a mountain. "No," Walter said. "What do you mean, no?" Gregory snapped. "You have the money. I know you have it in the retirement accounts. You are just sitting on it." "That money is for Athena," Walter said quietly, "and for my care if I get sick. It is not for your gambling." "It is not gambling. It is business." Gregory slammed his hand on the table. Walter stood up. He was shorter than Gregory, but at that moment, he seemed 10 feet tall. "It is always a sure thing with you, Gregory, and it always ends with you asking for a bailout. I have bailed you out of credit card debt. I bailed you out of that lawsuit in Boston. I bailed you out when you crashed your car." "I am your son," Gregory shouted. "Yes," Walter said, and his voice cracked with a sorrow that broke my heart. "You are my son, and because I love you, I will not help you dig this hole any deeper. You do not need a rescue. Gregory, you need to take responsibility. You are 45 years old. Stop acting like a child with a stolen credit card." Gregory stared at him. For a second, I saw pure hatred in my father's eyes. It was the look of a man who had been told no for the first time in a long time. "Fine," Gregory spat. "Keep your money. See if it keeps you warm when you are rotting in this shack." He stormed out. The front door slammed so hard the plates rattled in the cupboard. I walked into the kitchen. Walter was staring at the door. He looked old. Suddenly, undeniably old. "Did you hear that?" he asked, not turning around. "Yes," I whispered. He sighed and sat back down. He reached for a small, leather-bound notebook that he always kept on top of the refrigerator. I had seen it 1,000 times. I assumed it was a bird-watching log or a diary of the weather. He opened it to a fresh page. He uncapped his pen. His hand was shaking slightly, but his writing was firm. "What are you writing?" I asked, sitting opposite him. "Just keeping the record straight," he said softly. "Memory is a tricky thing. Athena, people forget. People rewrite history to make themselves look like the hero. But paper remembers." He wrote for a long time that night. I watched the ink flow onto the page, documenting the date, the time, the request, and the refusal. I did not know it then, but he was not just writing a diary entry. He was building an arsenal. He was compiling the ammunition for a war he hoped I would never have to fight, but was wise enough to know was coming. That notebook was the first brick in the wall he was building around me. Growing up with Walter meant I never felt poor. Even though we lived simply, it meant I never felt unloved, even though my parents were gone. But it also meant I grew up with a heightened sense of reality. I knew that the world was divided into 2 kinds of people, the ones who showed up, and the ones who signed checks to make you go away. And as I sat in that courtroom years later, watching Gregory sweat, I realized that Walter had taught me one final lesson that night in the kitchen. He taught me that the truth is not just something you speak, it is something you document. Gregory thought I was just the girl who accepted his expensive handbags and stayed quiet. He did not know that I was Walter Blackwood's granddaughter. He did not know that I had learned to read the fine print, and I had learned to keep a ledger of my own. But before the courtroom, before the betrayal, there was the loss. The moment the anchor was lifted, and I was left to drift in the storm with only the wolves for company. It started with a phone call before the sun came up, the kind of ring that shatters the silence and changes the world forever. The phone rang at 3:47 in the morning. It is a sound that nobody ever forgets. It is a shrill, violent intrusion into the sanctuary of sleep, a sound that triggers a primal panic before you are even fully awake. In the movies, people fumble for the receiver with groggy annoyance. In real life, somewhere deep in your gut, the moment that sound cuts through the darkness, you know that the world you went to sleep in no longer exists. I scrambled for the phone on my nightstand, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The screen was bright in the dark room. It was the hospital. I answered, my voice thick with sleep and fear. The voice on the other end was kind, professional, and devastating. It was a complication. The doctor said, a secondary stroke following the minor one he had suffered 2 days prior. It had happened in his sleep. It was peaceful. It was quick. He was gone. Walter Blackwood, the man who taught me to tie my shoes, the man who showed me how to read a balance sheet, the man who had been the only solid ground in my entire life was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark house. The silence was absolute. Usually, I could hear the faint hum of his SPAT machine from down the hall, or the creak of the floorboards as he got up for a glass of water. Now, the house felt vast and hollow, like a lung that had stopped breathing. I did not cry immediately. I felt a strange, cold numbness, as if my body had shut down all non-essential systems to focus on the impossible task of processing this new reality. I needed to call someone. My hand hovered over the phone. Who do you call when the person you usually call is the one who just died? I had friends. Sure, I had coworkers. But this was family business. This was the end of an era. My finger hovered over the contact named Dad. I had not spoken to Gregory in 6 months. Our last conversation had been a brief text message exchange on my birthday, where he sent a generic HBD and a digital gift card for a coffee chain I did not even like. I hesitated. I remembered the night sitting by the rotary phone. I remembered the empty seat at graduation, but biology is a cruel tether. Despite everything, despite the years of neglect and the walls I had built, a small, stupid part of me wanted my father. I wanted him to tell me it would be okay. I wanted him to step up. Just this once. I pressed the call button. He answered on the 4th ring. His voice was thick with sleep, irritation evident in his tone. Athena. It is 4 a.m. Is everything all right? He is gone, I whispered. My voice broke on the last word. The dam finally cracking. Grandpa, he died an hour ago. There was a pause on the line. I held my breath, waiting for a gasp, a sob, a word of comfort. I waited for the shared grief of a son losing his father. Oh, Gregory said. He cleared his throat. The irritation vanished, replaced by a smooth, practiced solemnity. I am so sorry. Athena, that is terrible news. I have to go to the hospital, I said, wiping a tear from my cheek. I have to sign the papers. I do not know what to do. Of course, Gregory said. Listen, take a breath. I will come up there. Tessa and I will drive up immediately. We will handle everything. For a second, relief washed over me. He was coming. He was going to help. Then he spoke again. Did he leave a will? The question hung in the air, sharp and discordant. It was the second sentence out of his mouth. How are you holding up? Was he in pain? What? I asked, confused. The paperwork? Athena, Gregory said, his voice sharpening slightly before smoothing out again. We need to know where the estate stands. Did he mention a new will to you? Or is the old one from 20 years ago still valid? I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the drafty house. I think so. Harold has it. Harold Wexler. Right. Good. Okay. We are packing now. We will be there by noon. Don't sign anything until I get there. Do you hear me? Don't sign a single thing." He hung up. I stared at the phone. The grief was still there, heavy and crushing, but now it was laced with something else, a prickle of unease. A warning bell rang in the distance. Gregory and Tessa arrived at 11:45. I was sitting on the front porch swing, watching the driveway. I expected to see a grieving son. I expected somber clothes and tear-stained faces. Instead, a sleek black SUV pulled up, kicking up gravel. Gregory stepped out wearing a crisp blazer and designer jeans. He looked like he was arriving for a weekend golf retreat. Tessa followed, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a venti coffee cup, but it was what they took out of the trunk that made my stomach turn. They did not just have overnight bags. They had 2 large, hard-shell suitcases. Gregory had a leather briefcase. Tessa was carrying a laptop bag. They looked like they were moving in, or setting up a mobile command center. "Athena," Gregory said, walking up the steps. He pulled me into a hug. It felt stiff, performative. He patted my back twice, pat, and then released me. "You look tired." "I haven't slept," I said. "Tragic," Tessa said, lowering her sunglasses to look at me. Her eyes were dry. "Just tragic. Walter was such a strong personality." They walked past me, into the house. I followed them, feeling like a guest in my own home. Gregory stopped in the living room. He looked around, his eyes scanning the space not with nostalgia, but with appraisal. He looked at the antique clock on the mantel. He looked at the oil paintings. Tessa walked straight to the hallway that led to Walter's study. I watched her. She stopped in front of the oil painting of the hunting dogs. She tilted her head, then reached out and tapped the wall next to the frame. She was looking for the wall safe. I froze. I had never told them about the safe. Walter kept his emergency cash and important deeds in there. It was hidden behind the painting. "How did she know we should get settled?" Gregory said, clapping his hands together. "There is a lot to do. The funeral arrangements, the obituary, the assets. It is going to be a heavy week." He walked over to the dining table and placed his briefcase on it. He snapped the latches open. The sound was loud in the quiet house. Click, click. "I was going to call the funeral home," I said quietly. "Mr. Henderson knows the family." "Already handled," Gregory said, pulling out a sleek laptop. "I called Henderson from the car, and I called Harold Wexler's office." My blood ran cold. "You called Grandpa's lawyer?" "Of course," Gregory said, not looking up as he booted up his computer. "I am his son, Athena. I am the next of kin. It is my responsibility to get the ball rolling. We have a meeting with Harold scheduled for the day after the funeral. No point dragging it out." He had been in the house for less than 5 minutes, and he had already taken control of the funeral and the legal proceedings. He had called the lawyer before he had even hugged his daughter. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity that felt entirely wrong. Gregory and Tessa turned the dining room into an office. They were on the phone constantly. I heard snippets of conversations that made my skin crawl. Liquidation, market value, probate timeline. They were not mourning him. They were auditing him. Dinner was a tense affair. I had no appetite, but Gregory insisted we order takeout from the only Italian place in town. We sat around the kitchen table, the smell of garlic bread clashing with the sterile atmosphere they had created. Gregory poured himself a glass of wine from a bottle he had brought with him. He swirled the red liquid, watching the legs run down the glass. "So," he started, his voice casual, too casual. "We need to talk about logistics, Athena." I pushed my pasta around my plate. "Can we not do this tonight? He hasn't even been gone for 24 hours. "Time is money, sweetheart," Tessa said, picking at her salad. "The government doesn't pause for grief. The estate tax clock is ticking." Gregory reached into his briefcase, which was sitting on the floor next to his chair. He pulled out a document. It was thick, stapled in the corner. "Tessa is right," Gregory said. "Look, I know this is overwhelming for you. You are young. You have your little job, your life. You do not need the headache of dealing with the IRS and the court system. It is a nightmare." He slid the document across the table toward me. What is this? I asked. It is a temporary power of attorney, Gregory said smoothly. Just for the administrative side of things. It allows me to access the accounts to pay for the funeral, handle the utility bills, and deal with the taxes. It just lets me take the burden off your shoulders. I looked at the paper. The legal jargon swam before my eyes, granting full authority, asset management, unrestricted access. I can pay for the funeral, I said. I have savings, and Grandpa had a prepaid plan. Gregory smiled, a tight, condescending smile. Athena, don't be naive. We are talking about freezing accounts. We are talking about complex filings. If we don't act fast, the state freezes everything. Do you want the house to go into foreclosure because we couldn't access the funds to pay the property tax? The taxes are paid, I said. Grandpa paid them in January. Gregory's smile faltered. You are missing the point. I am trying to help you. I am your father. I have been running businesses for 30 years. You work in, audit support? You are an assistant. I am a junior auditor, I corrected him. Exactly, he said, waving his hand dismissively. You are not equipped for this level of wealth management. Just sign the paper. I will handle the mess, and once the will is probated, we will distribute everything fairly. I just need to keep the lights on. I looked at the pen he was holding out to me. It was Mont Blanc, heavy, expensive. Walter's voice echoed in my head. Never sign a contract you have not read 3 times, and never, ever give someone the keys to your house unless you are ready for them to sell the furniture. I looked at Tessa. She was watching me like a hawk. Her fork was suspended halfway to her mouth. She was holding her breath. They needed this. They needed me to sign this now. Why, if there was a will? The executor would be named. If Walter named Gregory executor, he wouldn't need my power of attorney. He would have the authority automatically once the will was read. The fact that he was asking for this meant he was afraid he wasn't the executor. No, I said. The word hung in the air. Excuse me, Gregory said, his voice dropping an octave. No, I repeated, stronger this time. I am not signing anything tonight. I want to talk to Harold first. I want to see the will. Gregory slammed the wine glass down on the table. Red wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth like fresh blood. Athena, he snapped, the mask of the benevolent father vanishing instantly. Stop being difficult. You are acting like a paranoid child. I am trying to protect you from your own incompetence. I am not incompetent, I said, my voice shaking but my resolve hardening. And I am not signing. You don't understand the law, he shouted, his face reddening. You are going to ruin everything if the state gets involved because you are dragging your feet. We could lose half the estate to taxes. Do you want that? Do you want to throw away what your grandfather worked for because you are too stubborn to trust your own father? I trusted you to call me on Sundays, I said quietly. The room went deadly silent. Gregory stared at me, his jaw working. He looked like he wanted to reach across the table and shake me. This isn't about the past, he hissed. This is about business. You are making a mistake, a very expensive mistake. He snatched the document back and shoved it into his briefcase. Fine, do it the hard way. But when you are drowning in paperwork and legal fees, don't come crying to me. He stood up and stormed out of the kitchen. Tessa followed him, casting one last, venomous look in my direction. I sat alone at the kitchen table. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. I looked at the stain of red wine spreading on the cloth. I felt sick. My grandfather was dead. My father was in the next room, plotting, and I was alone in the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. But as I sat there, terrifyingly alone, I remembered something else Walter had told me. It was years ago, when we were watching a documentary about wolves. If your father ever suddenly decides to be kind, Athena, he had said, pointing at the screen where a wolf was circling a wounded deer, if he shows up with a smile and a gift after years of silence, do not look at the gift. Look at his hands. Check to see what he is reaching for. Because people like Gregory do not change. They just change tactics. I stood up. I walked to the hallway and listened. I could hear Gregory's voice from the guest room. He was on the phone again. "She didn't sign," he was saying, his voice low and urgent. "No, she is suspicious. We have to move to Plan B. Call the office. Tell them we are contesting. Yes, immediately." I backed away silently. I went to my room and locked the door. I dragged a chair under the handle. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake, clutching the pillow that still smelled like Cedar Hollow rain, and I realized that the funeral was not just going to be a goodbye. It was going to be the opening shot of a war. And I had absolutely no idea what Plan B was. But I knew one thing: Gregory Blackwood had not come here to bury his father. He had come here to bury me. The air inside St. Alder Chapel felt less like oxygen and more like a heavy blanket woven from lilies, damp wool, and the collective sorrow of a town that had lost one of its pillars. It was raining outside, a relentless gray Vermont drizzle that tapped against the stained glass windows like 1,000 fingers asking to be let in. The chapel was packed. I stood near the front, adjusting the black ribbon pinned to my dress, and looked out at the sea of faces. It seemed as though the entire population of Cedar Hollow had squeezed into the pews. There was Mr. Henderson from the hardware store, wiping his eyes with a dirty handkerchief. Mrs. Gable, the librarian who had helped Walter pick out my birthday books every year, was sobbing quietly in the third row. There were guys from the VFW, old men with stiff backs and hats held over their hearts, men who had served with Walter and knew a version of him I had only glimpsed in stories. They were here because Walter Blackwood was a man who paid his debts, kept his word, and plowed his neighbors' driveways when the snow was deep without ever asking for a dime. They were here because they loved him. And then there was Gregory. My father arrived 12 minutes after the service had begun. The heavy oak doors creaked open during the opening hymn, causing half the congregation to turn their heads. Gregory strode down the center aisle, not with the hurried, apologetic posture of someone who is late to a funeral, but with the confident stride of a celebrity walking a red carpet. He was wearing a black suit that fit him so perfectly it looked painted on, and sunglasses that he removed with a slow, theatrical motion as he approached the front row. Tessa trailed behind him, her heels clicking loudly on the stone floor. Click, click, click. It was a rhythm that cut through the organ music, announcing their presence more effectively than a trumpet blast. They squeezed into the empty space next to me, the space I had saved out of obligation, not desire. Gregory nodded at the priest, as if giving him permission to continue, then sat down. He did not look at the closed casket. He did not look at the picture of Walter surrounded by his golden retrievers. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, throughout the scripture reading, throughout the heartfelt speech by the mayor. Gregory sat with his head bowed. To an outsider, it might have looked like prayer, but I was sitting right next to him. I could see the glow of the screen reflecting off his polished cufflinks. I could see his thumbs moving in a blur. He was checking emails. He was responding to texts. At his own father's funeral, Gregory Blackwood was closing a deal. When it was my turn to speak, I walked up the 3 wooden steps to the lectern. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead. I gripped the sides of the podium, feeling the smooth wood under my sweating palms. I looked out at the town, and then I looked down at Gregory. He was still looking at his phone. "My grandfather," I began, my voice trembling before finding its footing, "was not a man of many words. He did not tell you he loved you with poetry. He told you he loved you by changing your oil before a long trip. He told you he loved you by sitting in a freezing hockey rink to watch you fall down for 2 hours." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the room. The neighbors remembered. "Walter Blackwood believed in one thing above all else," I continued, my eyes locking onto the top of Gregory's silver head. "He believed in showing up. He used to tell me that trust is not built on promises, it is built on presence. You cannot be a father, or a friend, or a good man if you are not there." Gregory's thumbs stopped moving. "He taught me that the people who really care about you are the ones who are standing next to you when the storm hits," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Not the ones who call you when the sun comes out to ask if you have any spare change." Gregory's shoulders stiffened. He slowly lowered the phone to his lap. He did not look up, but I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. He knew. He knew exactly who I was talking about, and for the first time all day, he was actually listening. "I will miss him," I whispered. "But I will never have to wonder if he loved me, because he was here." I stepped down. As I slid back into the pew, Gregory shifted away from me, creating a distinct gap between us. He did not pat my hand. He did not offer a tissue. He stared straight ahead at the altar with a cold, hard rage simmering behind his eyes. The service ended, and the congregation shuffled out into the rain for the burial. I stayed behind for a moment to collect the framed photo of Grandpa. Gregory and Tessa had already vanished, presumably to beat the traffic to the cemetery or, more likely, to find a better signal for their phones. I walked toward the back of the chapel, heading for the small coat room where I had left my trench coat. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, smelling of old hymnals and floor wax. As I turned the corner, I heard voices. They were hushed, urgent, and coming from the alcove near the vestry door. "He is not going to leave it to chance, Greg," Tessa's voice hissed. It was sharp, devoid of the mournful tone she had used in front of the guests. The old man was senile, but he was stubborn. "If they name her, we are in trouble." I froze. I pressed my back against the cold plaster wall, clutching Grandpa's photo to my chest. "I know," Gregory's voice replied. He sounded impatient. "But I am the son. The law favors the direct line. If he left everything to Athena, it is clearly a sign of diminished capacity. Who leaves nearly $5 million to a receptionist?" "Junior auditor," I mouthed silently, anger flaring in my gut. "We contest it," Gregory said. "We file immediately. We say she isolated him. We say she poisoned his mind against me. We say he was confused and she took advantage of it." "What about her?" Tessa asked. "She is going to fight." "She is weak, Tessa," Gregory scoffed. "You saw her up there. He was here. He was here. She is emotional. She is fragile." "We can use that," Tessa said. The malice in her voice made my blood run cold. "Remember when she took that semester off college? The anxiety thing. We can subpoena her medical records. We can paint her as unstable. We tell the court that Walter was afraid of her, that he only changed the will because he was scared of what she might do to herself if he didn't." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. That semester off had been 5 years ago. I had been overwhelmed by grief after losing my grandmother Walter's wife and the pressure of full-time school and 2 part-time jobs. I had taken a break to breathe, to heal, and now they were sharpening that pain into a weapon to stab me in the back. "Good angle," Gregory agreed. "No judge is going to hand over a massive estate to a girl who cannot even handle a semester of accounting without cracking. We will offer her a settlement, $50,000. She will take it. She is desperate for approval." I stepped around the corner. "I am not desperate for anything from you," I said. My voice was steady, deadly calm. Gregory and Tessa jumped apart like 2 teenagers caught smoking. Tessa actually dropped her purse. Gregory spun around, his face flashing through a spectrum of emotions: surprise, guilt, and finally, a smooth, plastic concern. "Athena," he said, holding his hands up. "We were just discussing options. We are worried about you." "I heard you," I said, walking closer. I did not shout. I did not cry. I felt a strange clarity, like the air had suddenly become very thin and sharp. "I heard you planning to lie about Grandpa. I heard you planning to use my grief against me. 2 minutes ago, we were burying your father, and you are standing in the back of the church plotting a smear campaign." "You are misunderstanding," Tessa said, recovering her composure. She smoothed her dress. "We are just being realistic. Athena, that kind of money, it destroys young people. Gregory is just trying to make sure the family legacy is protected." "Family legacy?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You mean the money. Because that is all you see. You do not see a legacy. You see a payout." I looked at Gregory. "You said I was unstable. You said I manipulated him. Athena, look. Gregory stepped forward, putting on his reasonable dad voice. Grandpa was old. He was sick. You were the only one there. It is natural to wonder if maybe you influenced him. I am just trying to protect you from a legal mess. If you just let me handle the estate, we can avoid all this ugliness. I am doing this for you. Stop, I said. He stopped. You are not protecting me, I said, staring into his eyes. They were blue, like mine, but they were empty. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking over my shoulder, calculating. He was looking at the house, the accounts, the bottom line. You are protecting your inheritance. I am your father, he snapped, the mask slipping again. I have a right to that estate. I am the one who built the family name, not you. Grandpa built it, I corrected him. You just borrowed against it. Gregory's face turned a blotchy red. You are an ungrateful, selfish little girl. You think you can just walk away with $5 million? You think I'm going to let you steal what is mine? It is not yours unless he gave it to you, I said. And we both know why you are so scared. Gregory, you are scared because you know exactly what he thought of you. I turned to Tessa. And my medical records are private. But if you try to drag my name through the mud, I promise you, I will make sure every single person in this town and every single client of Gregory's knows exactly why I took that semester off. They will know it was because I was working double shifts to pay for the tuition my father promised to cover but never did. Tessa's mouth snapped shut. I am leaving now, I said. I am going to the cemetery to bury my grandfather. Do not ride with me. Do not sit near me. Athena, wait, Gregory called out, his voice turning desperate again. Be reasonable. Sign the temporary power of attorney. Let's just secure the assets before the banks close. I turned back one last time. I am not signing anything, I said. And Gregory, I am hiring a lawyer, a real one. So if you want to talk to me, you can talk to her. I walked out into the rain. The water soaked my hair and ruined my shoes. But I didn't care. I felt cleaner than I had in days. As I walked toward my car, leaving my father and his wife standing in the shadows of the chapel, I made a silent vow to the man in the casket. They want to fight. Grandpa, I thought, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They think I am the same scared little girl they left behind, but they forgot who raised me. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call a therapist. I searched for a name Walter had told me to remember if things ever got ugly. Lila Grant, estate litigation. I pressed the dial. The funeral was over. The war had just begun. The office of Harold Wexler smelled of mahogany, lemon polish, and the intimidating weight of the law. It was located in a brick building downtown that had survived 3 floods and 2 recessions, much like Harold himself. He sat behind a desk that was large enough to land a small aircraft on. His hands folded calmly over a thick manila file. Harold was 70 years old, with eyebrows that looked like gray caterpillars and eyes that had seen every variety of human greed imaginable. He had been Walter's attorney for 40 years. He was also the only man I ever saw beat my grandfather at chess. I sat in a leather wingback chair on the left. Lila Grant, my attorney, sat next to me. She was silent, observant, a coiled spring ready to snap. On the right sat Gregory and Tessa. They looked like they were attending a board meeting for a hostile takeover. Gregory had a notepad and a gold pen ready. Tessa was sitting with her legs crossed, her foot bobbing up and down in a rhythm that betrayed her impatience. "Let us begin," Harold said. His voice was gravelly, a sound that commanded immediate silence. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Walter James Blackwood. We know why we are here, Harold," Gregory said, clicking his pen. "Let's skip the preamble. We have a flight to catch tonight." Harold looked at Gregory over the rim of his reading glasses. He did not blink. He did not speak. He just stared until Gregory shifted uncomfortably in his seat and muttered a quiet apology. "As I was saying," Harold continued, deliberately slowing his pace, Walter was very specific about how this meeting should be conducted. He wanted clarity. He wanted no room for interpretation. Harold opened the file. The sound of the heavy paper turning was the only noise in the room. "I will start with the distribution of the primary assets," Harold said. "Article 3, Section 1. He cleared his throat and began to read. "To my granddaughter, Athena Marie Blackwood, I leave the property located at 442 Cedar Lane, including the house, the land, and all contents therein." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The cabin. He had left me in the cabin. That was all I had really wanted, a place to be safe. "Furthermore," Harold continued, his voice steady, "I leave the entirety of my investment portfolio, currently held with Vanguard and Fidelity, including all stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. I also leave the contents of my primary savings account and the liquid assets in the checking account ending in 449. Tessa stopped bobbing her foot. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "The total valuation of these combined assets," Harold stated, looking up from the paper to look directly at Gregory, "as of the closing of markets yesterday, is approximately $4,850,000. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. I felt dizzy. $4 million. I knew Grandpa was comfortable. I knew he saved me. But he drove a 10-year-old truck and bought his jeans at the hardware store. I had no idea he had accumulated that kind of wealth." "Wait," Gregory said. His voice was faint, like he had been punched in the throat. "Read that again." "To my granddaughter, Athena Marie Blackwood," Harold repeated, emphasizing every syllable. "And the reasoning?" Lila Grant asked softly, speaking for the first time. "Did Mr. Blackwood state a reason for this distribution?" "He did," Harold said. He looked at me, and his eyes softened. The text reads, "I leave this to Athena because she stayed when others chose distance. She is the only one who never asked me for a dime, and therefore, she is the only one I trust to have them all. She has the discipline to build, not just to consume." I felt tears prick my eyes. It wasn't about the money, it was the vindication. He had seen me, all those years. He had seen me. "This is a joke," Gregory said. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. "This is a sick joke. Harold, he can't leave $5 million to a secretary." "Junior auditor," I said automatically. "Shut up," Gregory shouted, spinning on me. You manipulated him. You were there alone with him for years. You poisoned him against me." "Sit down, Gregory," Harold said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. "I will not sit down." Gregory's face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. "I am his son. I am his only child. Where is my name?" Read the rest of it. "I am getting to that," Harold said calmly. Article 3, Section 2. Gregory remained standing, his chest heaving. Tessa was gripping the armrest of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. She looked like she was doing mental math, subtracting $4 million from her future. "To my son, Gregory Thomas Blackwood," Harold read. Gregory smirked. "Here we go. The real assets, the trust, the hidden accounts. I leave the sum of $1,000, Harold read. Gregory froze. "Excuse me. $1,000, Harold repeated. "And the following statement, this amount is a deliberate and calculated decision. It is not an oversight. It is the sum total of the financial assistance I have not already provided to him over the last 40 years. I leave him this amount so that he cannot claim he was forgotten. He was remembered. He was simply weighed and found wanting." The room was so quiet I could hear the traffic on the street 3 stories down. $1,000. It was not an inheritance. It was an insult. In estate law, leaving a nominal sum like $1,000 is a strategic move. If you leave someone nothing, they can argue it was an administrative error, that they were accidentally omitted. By leaving a specific, small amount, Walter was proving he was thinking about Gregory, and he was choosing to give him practically nothing. "No," Gregory whispered. He looked at Tessa, then at me, then at Harold. No, that is not legal. He was senile. He had a stroke. He didn't know what he was signing. Actually, Harold said, pulling a second document from the file. Mr. Blackwood updated this exactly 20 months ago, anticipating that you would make this exact accusation. Gregory. He underwent a full neuropsychological evaluation on the day of the signing. I have 2 affidavits from board-certified psychiatrists attesting that Walter Blackwood was of sound mind, possessed superior cognitive function, and was under no duress or undue influence. Harold slid the papers across the desk. He was sharper than you, Gregory, until the very end. Gregory ignored the papers. He turned to me. The rage in his eyes shifted, morphing into that slippery, predatory charm I knew so well. He walked toward me, entering my personal space. Athena, he said, his voice dropping to a reasonable, pleading tone. Listen to me. You are in shock. I get it. This is a lot of money. It is too much money. You don't know how to handle this. You have never managed a portfolio. You will lose it all in a year. The taxes alone will bankrupt you. I know how to pay taxes, Dad, I said, my voice steady. Grandpa taught me. This is different, he insisted, sweating now. This is complex wealth management. Look, we can fix this. You can sign the assets over to a family trust. I will manage it. I will invest it for you. We will give you a monthly allowance, a generous one, $5,000 a month. You can quit your job. You can travel. Just let me handle the heavy lifting. You are not built for this kind of pressure. She is not signing anything, Lila Grant said, cutting in like a knife. And if you approach my client again with an unsolicited legal proposal, I will file a harassment suit. Gregory sneered at her. Stay out of this. This is family business. It is legal business now, I said. I stood up to face him. I was 5 inches shorter than him, but I didn't feel small. And the answer is no. I don't need an allowance, Dad, and I don't need a manager. I need you to accept that Grandpa made a choice. He made a mistake, Gregory screamed, losing his composure entirely. He was a bitter old man who wanted to punish me for being successful. I will not let you steal my birthright. It is not your birthright, Harold said from behind the desk. It was his money. He earned it. Gregory slammed his hands down on Harold's desk, leaning over the old lawyer. I am going to contest this. I am going to sue the estate. I will tie this up in court for 10 years. You will burn through every cent of that $4 million in legal fees before you ever see a dime of it. Athena, I promise you that. Harold did not flinch. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Gregory with a mixture of pity and steel. I would strongly advise against that. Gregory, Harold said, is that a threat? Gregory spat. It is a warning, Harold replied. Article 4 contains a standard no contest clause. If you sue and lose, you forfeit the $1,000, but that is standard. What is not standard is the addendum. Harold placed his hand on a sealed envelope at the back of the file. It was thick. It was red. Walter added a specific provision, Harold said slowly. He instructed that this final section of the will, which he called the last line, is to remain sealed. It is only to be opened and read into the public record if, and only if, Gregory Blackwood files a formal legal challenge against the estate. What is in it? Tessa asked, her voice shrill. I cannot say, Harold said, but Walter was very clear. He said, and I quote, if Gregory wants a war, let him fire the first shot, but warn him that the last line of this will does not just distribute my assets, it distributes my truth. Gregory laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. His truth. What is he going to do? Write a letter about how disappointed he is. I don't care about his feelings. Harold, I care about the money. He can write whatever he wants. Gregory, Harold said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do not do this. I am telling you as a friend of your father. Walk away with the $1,000. Walk away with your reputation. Do not force the court to read that envelope. I looked at the envelope. It sat there like a sleeping bomb. I didn't know what was in it either. Grandpa had never told me. But I knew Walter Blackwood. He didn't make idle threats. Gregory looked at the envelope, then at me. He saw the house, the stocks, the millions slipping through his fingers. He saw his daughter winning, and his ego could not handle it. "He is bluffing," Gregory declared, straightening his tie. "He was a dramatic old man. He is trying to scare me from the grave. Well, it won't work." He turned to me, his eyes cold and dead. "You brought this on yourself. Athena, you could have shared. Now you get nothing." He looked back at Harold. "File the papers," Gregory said. "We are contesting the will. I want a court date." Harold closed the file. He looked sad. He looked like a man who had just watched someone step off a cliff after being told there was no net. "Very well," Harold said. "I will inform the court. But remember this moment, Gregory. Remember that you were the one who asked for this." Gregory stormed out of the office, Tessa clicking along behind him, already on her phone to her own lawyers. I stood there in the silence. My heart was pounding. "Lila," I said, turning to my lawyer, "what is in that envelope?" Lila shook her head. "I don't know, but judging by the look on Harold's face, it is something nuclear." "He just declared war," I whispered. "No," Harold said, standing up and handing me the keys to the cabin. "He just committed suicide. He just doesn't know it yet." I took the keys. The metal was cold in my hand. I walked out of the office and into the blinding sunlight of the street, knowing that the next time I saw my father, we would not be family. We would be opposing counsel. And I had a feeling that whatever was in that red envelope was going to change everything. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked bored, as if destroying a family was just another item on his checklist between picking up dry cleaning and grabbing lunch. He handed me the thick envelope on the porch of the cabin, mumbled a standard legal greeting, and walked away before I could even read the first line. I sat on the porch swing, the same spot where I used to wait for Gregory's calls, and tore open the seal. Gregory Thomas Blackwood versus the estate of Walter James Blackwood. The language was sterile, precise, and absolutely brutal. The lawsuit did not just claim that the will was invalid. It claimed that I was a predator. Paragraph 4 alleged undue influence. It painted a picture of me isolating a confused, elderly man, cutting him off from his beloved son, and whispering poison into his ear to secure a fortune. Paragraph 7 claimed lack of testamentary capacity. It argued that Walter did not understand the extent of his assets or the consequences of his actions. Paragraph 9 was the one that made my hands shake. It referenced the respondent's history of psychological fragility, citing my semester off from college as proof that I was manipulative and unstable, implying I had emotionally blackmailed my grandfather into changing his will. It was a work of fiction, but it was written on court-stamped paper, which made it dangerous. I drove straight to Lila Grant's office. Lila was already waiting for me. Her office was the opposite of Harold's. Where Harold's was old-world mahogany and leather, Lila's was glass, steel, and aggressive minimalism. She was 45, sharp-featured, and had a reputation for shredding opponents who mistook her elegance for softness. She did not offer me tea. She offered me a strategy. "He actually filed," Lila said, reading the summons I placed on her desk. She didn't look surprised. "He is desperate. Men like Gregory Blackwood do not sue their daughters for $5 million because they want justice. They sue because they have a balloon payment due on a lifestyle they cannot afford. He is lying about everything," I said, pointing at the document. "He says I isolated Grandpa, Lila. I was the only one who visited him. Gregory didn't come for Christmas for 3 years straight." "I know," Lila said calmly. "But in court, truth is a secondary currency. Evidence is the primary one. We need to build a fortress of facts that makes his narrative look like the fantasy it is." She pulled out a fresh legal pad. "We are going to construct a timeline. I want you to go back 10 years. I want every date Gregory visited. I want every date he canceled. I want every holiday he misses. And conversely, I want every doctor's appointment you took Walter to, every grocery run, every time you handled his affairs. I have the journals, I said. Grandpa's notebooks. Get them, Lila commanded. We are going to quantify your love and his neglect. We are going to turn presents into data points. While we were working, the door opened and Harold Wexler walked in. He looked tired, carrying a heavy banker's box. He placed it on Lila's desk with a thud. The discovery request came in from Gregory's lawyer 10 minutes ago, Harold said grimly. They want everything: medical records, financial statements, emails, phone logs. They are going on a fishing expedition. Let them fish, Lila said, tapping her pen. What do we have for bait? Harold opened the box. I have the defense Walter prepared. He called it his Iron Dome. Harold pulled out a small, silver USB drive. It was sealed in a plastic evidence bag, dated and signed by 2 witnesses. This, Harold said, holding it up, is the video recording of the will signing. Walter didn't just sign the paper. He sat for a 40-minute interview with Dr. Eris Thorne, the leading geriatric psychiatrist in the state. Dr. Thorne asks him the date, the president, and the price of milk. He asks him to explain complex math problems. And then he asks him, in detail, why he is cutting Gregory out. Is that admissible? I asked. It is the gold standard, Lila said, a small smile touching her lips. If Gregory tries to say Walter was confused, we play this. It shows Walter was sharper than Gregory is on his best day. Harold reached back into the box. There is more. He handed me a cream-colored envelope. It had my name on it in Walter's handwriting. The ink was slightly faded. He wrote this the day he signed the will, Harold said gently. He told me to give it to you only if Gregory filed suit. He said you would need it for the ugly part. I took the envelope. My fingers traced the familiar loops of his handwriting. Read it, Lila said softly. We need to know what he wanted you to know. I opened it. The letter was short. My dearest Athena, if you are reading this, it means Gregory has done exactly what I feared he would do. He has chosen greed over dignity. I am sorry that you have to go through this. I tried to raise him to be a man who stands on his own feet, but somewhere along the way, he decided it was easier to stand on someone else's. Do not let him make you feel guilty. Do not let him use the family card. Family is not a hostage situation. He will try to say I was crazy. He will try to say you are weak. But you and I know the truth. Here is my last piece of advice. Do not set yourself on fire just to keep him warm. He has been cold his whole life because he refuses to build his own fire. That is not your fault. Fight him. Athena, not for the money, but for the principle. And if he pushes too hard, well, Harold knows where the skeleton key is. Love, Grandpa. I wiped a tear from the paper before it could smear the ink. Skeleton key, I asked. Harold and Lila exchanged a look. That brings us to the rest of the box, Harold said. He reached in and pulled out a thick red folder. It was sealed with wax, stamped with the words, Exhibit A, Restricted Access. What is that? I asked. That, Harold said, is the nuclear option. That is the document referenced in the last line of the will. The judge has a copy, and I have a copy. It contains documents that Walter spent the last 5 years compiling. Can we open it? I asked, reaching for it. Lila put her hand over mine, stopping me. No, not yet. The will's clause is specific. This is only to be deployed if the judge orders it, or if the trial reaches a specific phase of escalation. If we open it now, we might violate the seal protocols Walter set up. We have to let Gregory walk into the trap himself. But we need to know what we are fighting with, I argued. We know enough, Lila said. She turned back to her computer. I have been running my own background check on your father while you and Harold were talking, and the picture is not pretty. Lila spun her monitor around so I could see. It was a credit report, but it was filled with red flags. Gregory presents himself as a successful venture capitalist, Lila said, scrolling down. But the reality is a house of cards. He has 3 outstanding lawsuits against him in Florida for breach of contract. He has a tax lien from the IRS for $200,000 dating back to 3 years ago, and his primary residence, it is leveraged to the hilt. He has taken out 2 second mortgages. He is broke, I whispered. He is worse than broke, Lila corrected. He is drowning. He needs your $4 million not to get rich, but to stay out of prison. There are allegations of misappropriation of funds from his last partnership. If he doesn't pay them back soon, this moves from civil court to criminal court. I stared at the screen. The man who had mocked my job, who had belittled my little life, was essentially a con artist in a tailored suit. This explains the desperation, Harold noted. He cannot afford to lose. That makes him dangerous. Lila clicked on another tab. But here's the thing that disturbs me the most. Athena, I found something in the deep dive of public records. It is a small thing, but it links back to Cedar Hollow. She pulled up a scanned document. It was an application for a credit card. Look at the date, Lila pointed. August, 12 years ago, I read. I was 17. Look at the applicant. I looked. Athena Marie Blackwood. And look at the co-signer, Lila said. The signature was a scrawl I didn't recognize, but the name printed below it was Walter Blackwood. I never applied for a credit card when I was 17, I said, confused. Grandpa made me wait until I was 18 to build credit on my own. Exactly, Lila said. Her eyes were cold. And look at the status. Declined. Due to fraud alert. Walter didn't sign this, Lila said. Someone forged his signature. And someone tried to open a line of credit in your name, using Walter's address, when you were a minor. I felt a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. Gregory. The IP address on the digital application traced back to a hotel in Boston where Gregory was staying for a conference that week, Lila said. I cross-referenced it with his old travel logs. He tried to steal my identity, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He tried to ruin my credit before I even graduated high school. He tried, Harold said grimly. But Walter caught it. He got the alert. He stopped it. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. Because he didn't want you to hate your father, Harold said. Or maybe he was saving it. Maybe this is part of what is in Exhibit A. Lila sat back in her chair. This changes the narrative. This isn't just about a will. This is about a pattern of financial abuse. Gregory has been trying to access the Blackwood money through you for over a decade. He views you as a financial vehicle, not a daughter. So what do? I asked. The sadness was gone now. It was replaced by a cold, hard determination. We let him come at us, Lila said. We let him scream about how incompetent you are. We let him put his witnesses on the stand. We let him dig his hole so deep that he can't see the sky. And when he thinks he has you cornered, we hand the judge the key to Exhibit A. I looked at the sealed red folder again. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was my grandfather, reaching out from the grave, holding a sword. He wants a war, I said, echoing Walter's letter. Let's give him one. The phone on Lila's desk buzzed. She picked it up, listened for a moment, and then hung up. Her expression was grim. That was Gregory's lawyer, she said. They are moving fast. They have subpoenaed your employment records. They are going to try to prove you are financially illiterate because you are in a junior role. Let them look, I said. They are going to find out that I am an auditor. My entire job is finding people who lie about numbers. Lila smiled. It was a shark's smile. Exactly. Discovery starts tomorrow. Get your armor on. Athena, it is going to get dirty. I left the office with the copy of the letter in my purse, and the image of that forged credit application burned into my mind. I drove back to the empty cabin. I walked into the kitchen, where Walter used to drink his coffee. I opened the drawer where he kept his journals. There were dozens of them, years of records. I pulled out the one from 12 years ago. I flipped to August, and there it was, a single line, written in Walter's steady hand, dated the day the credit card application was rejected. Gregory tried to open a card in her name today. I stopped it. I did not call the police. I am giving him one last chance, but I'm starting the file. If he ever touches her future again, I will burn him down. I closed the book. The air in the kitchen felt charged, electric. Gregory thought he was fighting a grieving daughter. He didn't realize he was fighting a ghost who had been preparing for this battle for 12 years. I went to the fridge, took out a bottle of water, and toasted the empty chair. "Okay, Grandpa," I whispered. "Exhibit A it is." The settlement offer arrived on a Thursday morning, wrapped in the polite, bloodless language of corporate law. It was titled, "The Blackwood Family Preservation Trust Proposal." I sat in Lila Grant's conference room, reading the document. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Gregory was not asking for a split. He was proposing a complete restructuring of the estate. Under his terms, 70% of the assets, roughly $3.4 million, would be moved into a trust managed exclusively by him. I would receive a monthly stipend of $2,000, subject to good behavior clauses and periodic reviews of my mental health. He was offering to steal my inheritance and pay me an allowance with my own money. "He thinks I am an idiot," I said, tossing the document onto the glass table. "No," Lila said, flipping through the pages with a surgeon's precision. "He thinks you are scared. He thinks that if he throws enough legal jargon at you, you will panic and sign just to make the conflict go away. This is not a settlement. Athena, this is a demand for surrender." "Tell him no," I said. "Tell him absolutely not," Lila nodded. "I already drafted the rejection, but brace yourself. When a narcissist is told no, they do not reflect. They retaliate." The retaliation began less than 24 hours later. It started with a phone call from my great-aunt Margaret, a woman who usually only called to complain about her arthritis. "Athena," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured concern. "I just got off the phone with your father. He is devastated. He says you are confused. He says Walter brainwashed you in those last few years." "Brainwashed me?" I asked, gripping the phone. "He says Walter had dementia, dear, that he was paranoid, and that he turned you against your own father. Gregory is just worried about you. He says you are isolating yourself. Why won't you let him help you manage the money? You know you have never been good with numbers." My blood boiled. "Aunt Margaret, I am an auditor. My entire career is numbers." "Well," she sniffed, "Gregory says you only got that job because of a diversity quota. He says you are overwhelmed. Don't be stubborn. Athena, family comes first." I hung up, but the calls didn't stop. Cousins I hadn't seen in a decade, distant uncles, old family friends Gregory was working the Rolodex. He was spinning a narrative where he was the grieving, concerned patriarch and I was the unstable, manipulated daughter who was stealing the family legacy out of spite. Then came the text from Tessa. It popped up on my screen at 11 at night. No greeting, just a message. "Good daughters know how to share. Athena, do not force your father to take the gloves off. You know you cannot handle the pressure. Just sign the deal and go back to your quiet little life." I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and emailed it to Lila. 2 days later, Gregory's lawyers filed a motion to compel the release of my medical records. Specifically, they wanted the records from 9 years ago, during my sophomore year of college. I sat in Lila's office, feeling exposed. "They are targeting the gap semester," I said, staring at the floor. "I took 4 months off after Grandma died. I was depressed. I saw a therapist for grief counseling. I had trouble sleeping. And they are trying to spin that into chronic mental instability and lack of financial competency," Lila said, reading the motion. "They are arguing that someone with a history of psychological fragility cannot be entrusted with a multi-million-dollar estate." "I am not fragile," I said, my voice hardening. "I was grieving." "I know," Lila said. She spun her chair around and pulled a file from her briefcase. "And that is exactly what we are going to prove. Gregory is trying to paint a picture of a broken girl. We are going to show the judge the woman you became." She slapped a document onto the desk. It was my employment verification from Northgate Audit Solutions. I spoke to your boss, Mr. Henderson, Lila said. He was very eager to help once I explained the situation. He wrote a sworn affidavit. I picked up the paper. Athena Blackwood is one of the most meticulous junior auditors I have employed in 20 years. The affidavit read, she manages compliance audits for mid-sized corporations with revenues exceeding $10 million. Her attention to detail is impeccable. She has never missed a deadline or a discrepancy. To suggest she lacks financial literacy is factually incorrect. We are filing this tomorrow, Lila said with a shark-like grin. We are going to argue that if you are competent enough to audit a $10 million company, you are competent enough to manage your own inheritance. Gregory is trying to gaslight the court. We are going to turn on the floodlights. But Lila wasn't done. She opened her laptop. But while we are on the subject of competency, she said, her tone shifting to something darker, I found something interesting in Walter's digital archives. The USB drive Harold gave us, it had more than just the video. She turned the screen toward me. It was an email chain from 7 years ago. The subject line was Bridge Loan. Cosign request. It was an email from Gregory to Walter. Dad, I need you to cosign on this commercial loan for the Tech Park project in Austin. The bank just needs a guarantor with your credit score. The assets are there. The valuation is solid. It is just a formality. I have attached the financial statement. Then, there was Walter's reply. It was sent 2 hours later. Gregory. I looked at the attachment. I called the county assessor in Austin. The land value you listed on line 4 is 3 times the actual market value. And the secured tenants you listed on page 2, I called the first one. They have never heard of you. I am not signing this. And if you submit this to a bank with my name on it, I will call the fraud division myself. I stared at the screen. He was lying to the bank. He was inflating assets to secure loans. Lila said, that is bank fraud. Athena, it is a federal crime. Walter caught him. And look at the date. This was 2 months before Gregory stopped visiting for Christmas. He didn't stop visiting because he was busy, I realized. He stopped because Grandpa caught him trying to commit a felony. Lila nodded slowly. I think this goes deeper than just bad debts. I have been looking at Gregory's current business filings. There are patterns here. Shell companies, LLCs that open and close in 18 months. He moves money around to make it look like he is solvent. But he is just robbing Peter to pay Paul. And right now, Peter is empty, and Paul is holding a subpoena. He needs the inheritance to cover a fraud, I whispered. That is why he is so desperate. If he doesn't get the money, the house of cards falls down. Exactly, Lila said. He is not fighting for a payout. He is fighting for his freedom, and that makes him dangerous. But it also gives us leverage, if we can prove a pattern of financial dishonesty. His claim that he should manage your money becomes laughable. That night, I was at the cabin, sorting through old boxes of photos, trying to find comfort in the past. The wind was howling outside, rattling the window panes. My phone rang. It wasn't a blocked number. It was Gregory. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Lila had told me not to talk to him. Let everything go through the lawyers. But I was angry. I was angry about the text from Tessa. I was angry about the calls to my cousins. I was angry about the email I had just seen. I answered. What do you want? I asked, cutting straight to the chase. Athena, Gregory's voice came through the line. It wasn't the angry voice from the funeral. It wasn't the arrogant voice from the lawyer's office. It sounded broken. It sounded tired. Please, don't hang up. I should hang up, I said. Lila said, forget the lawyers for a second. Gregory interrupted, his voice cracking. Just listen to your dad. Please, it has been such a long week. I am sitting here looking at an old photo of you, the one from your 6th birthday. You were wearing that little yellow dress? I tightened my grip on the phone. I remembered that dress. I remembered waiting for him to show up to the party. He never did. Why are you calling? Dad? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I am tired of fighting. Athena, he sighed. This court case, it is tearing us apart. People are talking. The family is taking sides. I don't want this. Grandpa wouldn't want this. Grandpa left a video saying exactly what he wanted, I said. I know, Gregory said quickly. But he was angry. Look, I know I wasn't the best father. I made mistakes. I chased work too much. I left you alone too often. And I am sorry. I truly am. I missed so much. And I can't get that time back. He sniffled. It sounded real. For a split second, the little girl inside me, the one who waited by the window, perked up. Is he finally apologizing? I want to make it right, Gregory continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. I want us to be a family again. You, me, Tessa. I want to spend Christmas together. I want to help you. I don't want the lawyers taking 30% of your inheritance. I want to protect you. Protect me how? I asked. I have a new plan, he said, the energy returning to his voice slightly. We drop the lawsuit, both of us. No more court. We sign a private agreement, a modification. You keep the house, you keep half the cash. I take the other half to settle some old debts that are haunting me, and we invest the rest together. I can teach you. Athena, I can be the dad I should have been. You want to settle? I asked. I want to heal, he said. I sent a document to your email just now. It is just one page. It is simple. It just says we agree to split the liquid assets 50-50 and end the litigation. No trust, no control. Just a clean split. We can end this tonight. Athena, right now. He paused. I just need you to sign in that one spot at the bottom, he said. Just one signature, and I can make all the pain go away. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Just one signature. The tone was wrong. It was subtle, but it was there. The urgency, the shift from, I am sorry, to, sign the paper, was too fast. It was the salesman's close. He wasn't crying because he missed me. He was crying because he needed the sale. I remembered the email Lila showed me, the one where he asked Walter to co-sign. It is just a formality. I remembered the credit card application. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a co-signer. He wanted an accomplice. Athena, he asked, are you there? Did you get the email? I got it, I said. My voice is cold now. The little girl by the window had finally walked away. Great, he said, the relief audible. Just print it, sign it, and scan it back. I can stop the lawyers in the morning. You don't want forgiveness, do you? I asked quietly. What? You don't want a relationship, I said. You are not calling because you found a picture of me in a yellow dress. You are calling because you are broke. You are calling because Lila found the email about the Austin loan. There was silence on the other end, a sharp intake of breath. You found what? His voice was no longer soft. It was sharp. The bridge loan, I said. The one where you lied about the land value. We know, Dad. We know about the fraud. We know about the debt. You listen to me. His voice dropped, turning into a growl. The mask was gone completely. You don't know anything about my business. You are a child. I am the child holding the checkbook, I said. And I am not signing your document. Not 50%. Not 1%. You get the $1,000 Grandpa left you. That is it. You ungrateful little witch, he spat. I will ruin you in court. I will put every failure of your life on display. I will make you wish you were never born. You already did that when I was 5, I said. But I got over it. Good night, Gregory. I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was shaking from adrenaline. I looked at the phone. He had slipped. He had tried to use love as a currency, and when the transaction failed, he revealed the monster underneath. I called Lila immediately. It was midnight, but she answered on the first ring. He called me, I said. Did you sign anything? Lila asked sharply. No, I said. But Lila? He threatened me, and he panicked when I mentioned the Austin loan. Good, Lila said. That confirms it. Fraud is the weak point. We are going to hammer it. He said he is going to ruin me in court, I told her. Let him try, Lila said. Because while he was trying to manipulate you, I found the rest of the timeline. I found the dates he was traveling for business while Walter was in the hospital last year. He wasn't working. Athena, he was in Las Vegas. I closed my eyes. Add it to the file. Athena, Lila said gently, you did good. You didn't take the bait. I almost did, I admitted. He sounded real. That is what makes him good at what he does, Lila said. But you are better. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we stop defending. Tomorrow, we will start hunting. I put the phone down. I looked at the empty kitchen. I didn't feel lonely anymore. I felt ready. Gregory Blackwood had made his move. He had tried to exploit the one thing he thought I still wanted, his love, but he had forgotten to check the expiration date. I walked over to the calendar on the wall and circled the date of the hearing. It was 2 weeks away. You want a signature? Dad, I whispered to the empty room. I will give you one, on the subpoena. The legal phase known as discovery sounds like an adventure. It sounds like you are going to unearth hidden treasures or ancient cities. In reality, discovery is a slow, grinding autopsy of a life lived on paper. It is a process where strangers in expensive suits dissect every credit card purchase, every medical prescription, and every text message sent in the last decade, looking for a weapon they can use to slit your throat in open court. For 2 weeks, Lila Grant and I lived inside a windowless conference room surrounded by bankers' boxes. The air smelled of toner ink and stale coffee. We were building a wall of facts to protect my future, while Gregory's team was frantically throwing mud hoping something would stick. They requested everything. They wanted my college transcripts. They wanted my therapy notes from 5 years ago. They wanted to know why I spent $60 at a liquor store in 2019. They were trying to build a mosaic of a woman who was too unstable to handle $4,850,000. But while they were digging into my past, Lila was digging into their present. He is getting sloppy, Lila said one Tuesday afternoon, tossing a deposition onto the table. He is submitting witness lists that look impressive on the surface, but they are hollow underneath. She pointed to a name on the list, Arthur Penhaligon. Who is he? I asked. According to Gregory's filing, he is a close family friend who visited Walter frequently in the last year, Lila said, her eyes scanning her laptop screen. His statement says that Walter was constantly confused, often forgetting who Gregory was, and frequently got lost in his own house. He claims Walter told him, and I quote, "I am afraid of Athena. She won't let me use the phone." I felt the blood drain from my face. That is a lie. I never stopped Grandpa from using the phone, and I have never heard of Arthur Penhaligon in my life. He never came to the cabin. I know, Lila said, a shark-like grin spreading across her face, because Arthur Penhaligon lives in Florida. And do you know who pays his salary? She turned the screen toward me. It was a LinkedIn profile, cross-referenced with a corporate registry. Arthur is a senior consultant for a company called Blue Water Logistics, Lila said. And Blue Water Logistics is a subsidiary of the firm Gregory is currently trying to save from bankruptcy. Arthur isn't a family friend. Athena, he is an employee. Gregory is paying a subordinate to perjure himself. Can we prove it? I asked. We don't just prove it, Lila said, archiving the screenshot. We save it. We let Arthur take the stand. We let him swear on the Bible. And then, on cross-examination, I ask him if his holiday bonus is contingent on his testimony. We will destroy his credibility in 30 seconds. It was a win, but it felt dirty. I hated that Gregory was turning people into pawns. I hated that he was willing to ruin a stranger's reputation just to ruin mine. But the biggest weapon came from the ghost himself. We had finally cracked the passcode on Walter's old iPhone. It was an older model. The screen cracked in the corner, sitting in the evidence bag like a relic. Walter wasn't tech-savvy, but he knew how to use the voice memo app. He used it to record grocery lists and ideas for the garden. Lila was scrubbing through the audio files when she stopped. Athena, she said, her voice sharp. Put the headphones on. I slid the heavy headphones over my ears. Lila pressed play. The timestamp was from 3 years ago, Christmas Eve. First, there was the sound of rustling fabric, like the phone was being shoved into a pocket. Then, Walter's voice, muffled but clear. I am recording this because I do not trust him. Then, a door slam. And then, Gregory's voice. It was not the smooth, polished voice of the courtroom. It was slurred, angry, the voice of a man who had had too much scotch. You are sitting on a gold mine, Dad, and you are letting it rot. I need the liquidity. Just sign the guarantor form. I told you no. Gregory, Walter's voice was calm, steady. I am not betting the house on your schemes. It is not a scheme, Gregory shouted. The audio spiked, hurting my ears. It is an investment. If you don't help me, I am going under. Do you hear me? And if I go under, I am taking this whole family with me. You will never see me again. If you don't sign this, you lose your son. Tonight, there was silence on the tape, a long, heavy silence. Then Walter spoke, his voice sounding incredibly sad. I lost my son a long time ago. Gregory, I am just looking at the man who ate him. The recording ended. I took the headphones off, my hands trembling. He threatened him, I whispered. He used his own presence as a bargaining chip. It is coercion, Lila said, her eyes cold. It proves the relationship was transactional. It proves Gregory viewed Walter as a bank, not a father, and it proves that Walter was lucid enough to stand his ground. We will submit this tomorrow, I asked. No, Lila said, leaning back in her chair. We hold it. This is our pocket ace. If we submit it now, Gregory's lawyers will find a way to suppress it or argue context. We wait until Gregory is on the stand. We wait until he testifies that he and his father had a loving, mutually respectful relationship, and then we play the tape. The tension was ratcheting up. The court date was 5 days away. Gregory must have sensed that his wall of lies was showing cracks, because the psychological warfare intensified. I received a courier package at my apartment. It was not a legal document. It was a letter, handwritten on expensive stationery. Athena, I am writing this as your father, not a litigant. This has gone too far. I know Lila Grant is pushing you to fight. She is a shark. Athena, she wants her 30% cut of the estate. She doesn't care if she destroys our family reputation to get it. I am willing to make this go away. If you sign the transfer agreement just 50% now, I will seal the files. No one needs to know about your time in the psychiatric clinic. No one needs to know about the academic probation. I will protect your privacy. But if we go to court on Monday, my lawyers are going to read your therapy journals into the public record. They will make you look incompetent. You will never work in finance again. Don't let them break you. Let me save you. Dad. I sat on my floor, holding the letter. The threat was veiled, but it was there. Sign, or I will humiliate you. For a moment, panic seized me, the thought of my darkest days, my grief-stricken ramblings from therapy, being read aloud in a courtroom full of strangers. It was nauseating. I thought about my job. I thought about my boss. Mr. Henderson. Would he fire me if he thought I was unstable? I reached for my phone to call Lila. I wanted to tell her maybe we should settle. Maybe half the money was worth my dignity. But then, my hand brushed against the leather cover of Walter's notebook, which I kept on my coffee table. I opened it to a random page. It was an entry from when I was 12. Athena stood up to a bully at school today. The boy made fun of her shoes. She didn't cry. She told him that shoes don't make you fast. Your feet do. I have never been prouder. She is stronger than she knows. I read the line again. She is stronger than she knows. Walter had written that. He had believed it. If I signed Gregory's deal, I would be proving him wrong. I would be proving that the bully won. I stood up. I walked to the shredder in the corner of my home office. I fed Gregory's letter into the machine. I watched the expensive stationery turn into confetti. I am not signing, I said to the empty room. Read the journals. I don't care. 2 days before the hearing, the miracle happened, and like most miracles in the legal world, it arrived in the form of a clerical error. Gregory's legal team submitted a document called a Summary of Facts. It was a sworn affidavit from Gregory, detailing the timeline of his interactions with Walter leading up to the changing of the will. It was intended to prove that he was present, involved, and aware of Walter's mental decline. Lila called me at 7 a.m. "Get to my office," she said. "Now, and bring donuts. We are celebrating." When I arrived, Lila was practically vibrating with energy. She had the affidavit spread out on her desk next to a stack of hospital records. "Look at paragraph 12, Lila said, pointing a manicured finger at the paper. I read Gregory's statement on the afternoon of October 14th, 2 years ago. I visited my father at his residence. We sat in the kitchen for 2 hours. During this conversation, my father was extremely agitated. He did not know what day it was. He kept calling me by his brother's name. It was clear to me on that day, October 14th, that he was no longer capable of managing his own affairs. "Okay," I said. "He is claiming Grandpa was confused. We knew he would say that." "Look at the date. Athena," Lila said, her eyes gleaming. "October 14th. "Right, October 14th. Lila slapped another document down on top of it. It was a billing statement from St. Jude's Medical Center. "Where was Walter on October 14th? Lila asked. I scanned the medical bill. Patient Walter Blackwood. Admission date October 13th. Discharge date October 15th. Procedure elective knee arthroscopy. My jaw dropped. "He was in the hospital," I whispered. "He was not just in the hospital," Lila said triumphantly. On the afternoon of October 14th, according to the nursing notes, Walter was under heavy sedation recovering from anesthesia. He was asleep in a recovery room 20 miles away from the kitchen where Gregory claims they were having a conversation. "Gregory wasn't there," I said, the realization washing over me. "He made it up." "He guessed," Lila corrected. "He knew he visited sometime that week, or maybe he just picked a date that sounded good. He didn't check his calendar, and he definitely didn't check Walter's medical records because he didn't care enough to visit him in the hospital when it actually happened." "This proves he's lying under oath," I said. "This proves everything," Lila said. "It proves the conversation never happened. It proves his eyewitness testimony of Walter's decline is a fabrication. He just handed us the smoking gun, Athena, and he signed his name to it." "Do we tell them?" I asked. "Do we send a correction?" Lila laughed. It was a cold, terrifying sound. "Oh, God, no. We don't say a word. We let him walk into court on Monday. We let him sit on that stand. We let him tell the judge all about that sad, confused afternoon in the kitchen on October 14th. We let him cry about it." She slammed the file shut. "And then," she said, "I am going to ask him if he has a twin brother who visits hospitals, or if he is just a liar." I looked at the file. Gregory had tried to rewrite history, but he had forgotten that history has receipts. He had built his entire case on a foundation of lies, and one wrong date was about to bring the whole thing crashing down. "He is going to perjure himself," I said. "He is going to destroy." Lila said, "Go home. Athena, iron your suit. Monday isn't going to be a hearing. It is going to be an execution." I walked out of the office. Stepping into the crisp autumn air, the fear was gone. The anxiety about my journals. The shame about the gap semester, it all evaporated. Gregory thought he was the author of this story. He thought he could edit the timeline to suit his needs. But he had forgotten the one thing Walter had taught me from the very beginning: always check the paperwork. My father had made a fatal error. He had underestimated the truth, and in 48 hours, I was going to introduce him to it. The morning of the hearing, the sky over Bryan County was a bruise-colored purple, threatening a storm that refused to break. Inside courtroom 4, the atmosphere was even heavier. The air conditioning was humming, but it did nothing to cool the stifling heat of anticipation. I sat at the plaintiff's table. Though technically I was the defendant in Gregory's narrative, Lila Grant sat beside me, her posture perfect. her eyes scanning her notes with the detached focus of a bomb disposal expert. On the other side of the aisle, Gregory looked the part of the tragic hero. He had forgotten the sharp Italian suit for a softer, charcoal gray number. He looked tired. He looked sad. He looked like a loving son who had been robbed of his birthright by a manipulative intruder. Judge Harrison entered, his black robe billowing. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked at both legal teams. "We are here to hear the motion to invalidate the last will and testament of Walter James Blackwood," the judge said. "Mr. Sterling, you may call your first witness." Gregory's lawyer, a man named Sterling who wore a bow tie and a perpetual sneer, called Gregory to the stand. My father walked to the witness box. He placed his hand on the Bible. He swore to tell the truth. It was the first lie of the day. Sterling guided him through a rehearsed script. Gregory spoke about his close bond with Walter. He spoke about how they talked on the phone weekly. He painted a picture of a doting son who was simply too busy with international business to visit as often as he liked, but whose heart was always in Cedar Hollow. "Mr. Blackwood," Sterling asked, his voice dripping with sympathy, "when did you first notice your father's mental decline?" Gregory sighed, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. "It was about 2 years ago. He started forgetting names. He would call me and think I was his brother. He was confused, paranoid." "And did you visit him during this period?" "I did," Gregory said, nodding earnestly. "I drove up as often as I could. I remember one specific visit vividly. It was October 14th, 2 years ago. I spent the whole afternoon with him in the kitchen. We drank tea. He didn't know what year it was. He kept asking where my mother was. She's been dead for a decade. It broke my heart. I felt Lila stiffen beside me. She didn't look up. She just circled something on her legal pad. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," Sterling said. "Ms. Grant," the judge said. "Your witness?" Lila stood up. She didn't walk toward the podium. She walked toward the witness stand, holding a single piece of paper. "Mr. Blackwood," Lila began, her voice pleasant, almost conversational. "You stated that you are certain about the date of this visit, October 14th. "Yes," Gregory said, looking confident. "It was just after my birthday. I remember it clearly." "You sat in the kitchen?" "Yes. For 2 hours." "At least 2 hours," Gregory confirmed. He was very distressed. Lila nodded. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to submit Defense Exhibit C into evidence. These are the certified billing records from St. Jude's Medical Center." She handed the paper to the bailiff, who handed it to Gregory. "Mr. Blackwood," Lila said, her voice dropping the pleasantry and becoming razor-sharp, "could you please read the entry for October 14th? Gregory looked at the paper. His confidence faltered. He squinted. "It says, knee arthroscopy," he mumbled. "Read the location of the patient on the afternoon of October 14th, Lila commanded. Gregory swallowed hard. "Recovery Room B, Post-Anesthesia Care Unit." "So," Lila said, turning to face the gallery. "On the afternoon you claim you were drinking tea with your father in his kitchen. Walter Blackwood was actually 20 miles away, unconscious in a hospital bed, recovering from knee surgery." The courtroom went silent. Gregory's face turned a pale, sickly shade of gray. I might have the dates mixed up," Gregory stammered. "It was a stressful time." "You were very specific a moment ago," Lila pressed. "You said you remembered it vividly. You said it broke your heart. But if you were not there on the 14th, Mr. Blackwood, and you were not there on the 13th or the 15th, according to your credit card records which place you in Las Vegas, when exactly did you see your father's decline? Or did you just imagine it? Like you imagined this tea party?" "Objection," Sterling shouted, standing up. "Argumentative." "Sustained," the judge said. But he was looking at Gregory with a new, cold scrutiny. "Mr. Blackwood, be very careful with your testimony." Lila sat down. The damage was done. Gregory's foundation had cracked. But Sterling wasn't finished. He knew he had lost on the capacity argument, so he pivoted to the character assassination. He called me to the stand. I walked up the wooden steps. I sat in the chair where my father had just lied. I looked at Gregory. He was glaring at me, his eyes filled with a venomous promise of retribution. Sterling approached me like a wolf circling a wounded deer. "Ms. Blackwood," he said, "let us talk about your relationship with your grandfather. You lived with him rent-free for years, correct?" "I lived with him," I said. "I paid the utility bills and bought the groceries." "You were dependent on him," Sterling corrected. "And you have a history of dependency, don't you? Let us look at your college records. You took a leave of absence 5 years ago. Why?" "I was grieving," I said. "You were in therapy," Sterling said, holding up a file. "For severe anxiety and depression. You were unable to attend classes. You were unable to function. Is that correct?" "I was struggling," I said steadily. "And in that state of fragility," Sterling pressed, leaning in, "is it not true that you latched onto your grandfather, that you isolated him, that you made him feel that he was the only person in the world who could protect you, manipulating his protective instincts to secure your financial future?" "No," I said. "You are a woman who couldn't handle a semester of college." Sterling sneered. "And we are supposed to believe you are capable of managing a $5 million estate. Or did you just cry until an old man gave you what you wanted?" I looked at Sterling, then I looked past him, to Gregory. "I took a semester off," I said, my voice projecting clear and strong to the back of the room. "Because my grandmother died, and because I was working 2 jobs to pay for the tuition my father promised to cover but never did. I was exhausted. I was grieving. And yes, I was weak." I paused. The room was listening. "But being weak is not a crime," I continued. "And relying on my grandfather was not manipulation. It was survival. I was weak because I was abandoned. But that did not turn me into a manipulator. It turned me into someone who knows the value of showing up. I was there when he broke his hip. I was there when he got pneumonia. I was there to hold his hand. Where was Gregory?" Sterling opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You want to talk about stability?" I asked. "I have held the same job for 4 years. I have excellent credit. I have never been sued for fraud. Can my father say the same?" "Objection," Sterling yelled. "Relevance." "I will allow it," the judge said quietly. I stepped down. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't cried. "Your Honor," Lila said, standing up. "To settle the matter of Walter Blackwood's capacity and his intent, the defense calls its final witness, Walter Blackwood himself." She plugged the USB drive into the court's AV system. The large screens on the wall flickered to life. There he was. Grandpa Walter sat in Harold's office. He was wearing his favorite plaid shirt. He looked healthy. His eyes were sharp, blue, and incredibly alive. The videographer asked him the date. He answered immediately. He listed the current stock prices. He was named the Prime Minister of England. Then, Dr. Thorne, the psychiatrist, asked the million-dollar question. "Walter, you are leaving the vast majority of your estate to your granddaughter, Athena, and you are leaving your son, Gregory, only $1,000. Can you explain why?" On the screen, Walter leaned forward. It felt like he was looking directly at Gregory. "I love my son," Walter said. His voice filled the courtroom, warm and familiar. "But I do not like him, and I definitely do not trust him." Gregory flinched in his seat. "Gregory has a hole in him," Walter continued. "He tries to fill it with things, with status, with money. If I give him this estate, it will be gone in 5 years. He will gamble it on risky deals. He will buy things he does not need to impress people who do not care." "Is Athena manipulating you?" the doctor asked. Walter laughed. It was a rich, hearty sound. "Athena, no. Athena is the only one who ever told me the truth. She told me when I was being stubborn. She told me when I was wrong. She is the moral compass of this family. Gregory thinks money is power. Athena knows money is just a tool." Then, Walter looked straight into the camera lens. I am not leaving this money to Athena to punish Gregory. I am leaving it to her to save it, because I do not trust Gregory to hold a hammer without breaking a window, and I certainly do not trust him to hold $5 million without turning it into a weapon." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Then, a loud slam shattered the quiet. Gregory had brought his fist down on the table. He was standing up, his face a mask of red fury. "He didn't say that," Gregory shouted, pointing at the screen. "That is edited. That is a deepfake. My father would never say that about me." "Mr. Blackwood, sit down," the judge barked. "It is a lie," Gregory screamed, losing all control. "She made him say it. She wrote the script. She is a thief." "Bailiff," the judge ordered. The bailiff stepped forward, hand on his belt. Gregory looked around. Realizing everyone was staring at him, he saw the horror on Tessa's face. He saw the pity in the eyes of the jury. He slumped back into his chair, breathing heavily. Judge Harrison looked at Gregory for a long moment. He looked like a man who had seen enough. "I have heard the testimony," Judge Harrison said, his voice level and final. "I have seen the medical records, and I have heard the decedent speak for himself. The plaintiff's claim that Walter Blackwood lacked capacity is entirely without merit. The claim of undue influence is dismissed. The will submitted by the defense is valid." I let out a breath. I had won. The house was mine. The legacy was safe, but the judge wasn't finished. "However," Judge Harrison said, opening the file in front of him, "by filing this contest, and by pursuing it to a verdict, we must now address Article 4 of the will." Gregory looked up. He seemed dazed. "The no contest clause," the judge said. "Mr. Blackwood, you were warned. Your lawyer was warned. The will states that any beneficiary who challenges the validity of this document forfeits their inheritance." "It is just $1,000, Gregory muttered, trying to regain some dignity. "Keep it. I don't care about the 1,000. "It is not just the $1,000, the judge said. He reached for the thick red envelope that had been sitting on his bench all morning. The seal was still unbroken. "The will contains a conditional addendum," the judge said. The last line. It states that if Gregory Blackwood files a formal contest, this envelope is to be opened and its contents executed. Gregory went still. He stared at the red envelope. "Your Honor." Sterling stood up, looking nervous. "My client withdraws his claim. We move to dismiss." "It is too late for that, Counselor," the judge said. "The verdict has been rendered. The condition has been met. The trigger has been pulled." The judge picked up a letter opener. The sound of the heavy paper tearing was louder than Gregory's shout had been. I watched Gregory. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. In its place was a dawn of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at Tessa, but she was inching her chair away from him again. He looked at me, but I didn't look away. "What is it?" Gregory whispered. "What did he do?" The judge pulled out a stack of documents. He adjusted his glasses. He read the first page silently. Then he looked up at Gregory, and his expression was one of shock. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said, "you should have taken the $1,000. The judge cleared his throat and began to read the final decree of Walter Blackwood. And as the words spilled out, the air left the room, leaving only the cold, hard vacuum of consequences. The room was so quiet that the sound of the judge turning a page sounded like a gunshot. Judge Harrison held the red envelope in his hands, the contents finally exposed to the fluorescent lights of the courtroom. It was no longer a sealed threat. It was an active weapon. Gregory was gripping the edge of the defense table. His knuckles were white. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure of the arrogant man who had walked in here 2 hours ago. He knew his father. He knew that Walter Blackwood did not bluff. And he knew exactly what kind of dirt existed in the dark corners of his own life. "Article 4, subsection B," Judge Harrison read, his voice projecting to the back of the room without the need for a microphone. The penalty for contesting. He looked over his glasses at Gregory. The will states, should any beneficiary challenge the validity of this testament and fail to prove their case, they shall forfeit any and all gifts, bequests, or devises provided herein. The judge paused. Mr. Blackwood, the $1,000 your father left you is hereby forfeited. It returns to the residual estate. It now belongs to Athena Blackwood. Gregory let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. Keep it, I told you. I don't care about the pocket change. I want to know what is in the addendum. I am getting to that, Judge Harrison said, his voice dropping to a temperature that froze the air in the room. Subsection C, the activation of Exhibit A. The judge picked up the stack of papers he had pulled from the red envelope. He held them up. They were thick. They were detailed. And even from where I sat, 20 feet away, I could see official stamps, bank logos, notary seals. The text reads as follows, the judge intoned. In the event that this will is contested specifically by my son, Gregory Thomas Blackwood, I, Walter James Blackwood, hereby instruct my executor and the presiding judge to immediately release the contents of Exhibit A to the following entities: the District Attorney's Office of Bryan County, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Federal Trade Commission. No, Gregory shouted, jumping to his feet. His chair toppled over behind him with a loud crash. You can't do that. That is private financial information. That is privileged. Sit down, Mr. Blackwood. The bailiff stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. It is not privileged, Judge Harrison said calmly. It is evidence. Your father has classified these documents not as personal memories, but as a whistleblowing report. Gregory looked like he was having a heart attack. He clawed at his tie, loosening it. This is insane. He is vindictive. He is trying to ruin me from the grave. He is not trying, I whispered to myself, watching the man who had abandoned me unravel. He is succeeding. The judge looked down at the papers. The list of documents included in Exhibit A is extensive. It includes the original loan application for the Austin Tech Park development, on which you forged your father's signature as a guarantor. A gasp went through the gallery. Forgery. It was a felony. It includes, the judge continued, relentlessly, correspondence between yourself and the shell company Silver Orchard Holdings, detailing the movement of funds to evade tax liens in the years 2020 and 2021. Tessa let out a small, strangled cry. She covered her mouth with her hand. She was looking at Gregory with pure horror. She wasn't horrified by what he had done. She was horrified that he had been caught. She was watching her lifestyle evaporate in real time. And, the judge said, flipping to the next page, it includes a sworn affidavit from Walter Blackwood regarding an incident 12 years ago involving the attempted opening of a credit line in the name of a minor. My heart stopped. The credit card, the one Lila had found. Judge Harrison looked directly at me for a moment, his eyes full of sympathy, before turning his gaze back to Gregory. It was a gaze that promised judgment, not just legal, but moral. But that is not the end, the judge said. There is a final paragraph, the last line, that Mr. Blackwood insisted be read aloud. Gregory was shaking his head. Don't, he begged. His voice was a rasp. Please, don't read it. I will withdraw. I will sign anything. Just seal it back up. I cannot seal it. Mr. Blackwood, the judge said, you pulled the trigger when you filed the motion. The bullet has left the chamber. The judge lifted the final page. It was a single sheet of handwritten paper. I recognized the script immediately. It was the same handwriting that had taught me how to write my name. The last line states, the judge read, I, Walter Blackwood, have compiled this evidence not because I hate my son, but because I must protect my granddaughter. Gregory has proven that he views family not as blood, but as collateral. He tried to use Athena's identity to secure debt when she was a child. I stopped him then, but I know that when I am gone, he will come for her again. He will use guilt. He will use threats. He will try to drain her dry to fill the hole in his own soul. Tears streamed down my face. Grandpa. He knew. He had seen it all coming. The judge continued reading Walter's words. Therefore, I am not just leaving the authorities the evidence of his crimes. I am leaving Athena a shield. By the power of this trust, I hereby mandate a protective restriction. For a period of 10 years following my death, Athena Blackwood is legally prohibited from transferring any assets, cash, or property exceeding the value of 1% of the total estate to Gregory Blackwood, Tessa Langford, or any entity associated with them, even if she wants to, even if he begs. She cannot save him. The trust is locked. If she attempts to violate this, the entire estate dissolves and is donated to the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and crushing. It was the ultimate checkmate. Walter hadn't just given me money. He had taken away my ability to surrender. He knew that Gregory would come to me crying. He knew Gregory would play the "I am your dad, I am going to jail" card. He knew that I, being the person he raised, might be soft enough to write a check to keep my father out of prison. So he had tied my hands. I can't help you, I realized, speaking aloud in the silent courtroom. Even if I wanted to, I can't give you a dime. Gregory stared at me. He understood it too. He looked at the judge, then at me, and finally, the reality of his situation crashed down on him. The lawsuit hadn't just failed to get him the money, it had triggered a mandatory reporting of his fraud to the federal government, and it had legally blocked his only potential lifeline. "Athena," Gregory pleaded, stumbling toward the plaintiff's table. He looked pathetic. The polished businessman was gone. This was just a desperate, broken man. "Athena, you have to stop this. You have to tell the judge to seal the file. They are going to arrest me. Do you hear me? They are going to put me in prison." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had left me on the porch, the man who had tried to ruin my credit, the man who had lied about my mental health to steal my future. "I can't stop it, Dad," I said. My voice was steady. "You filed the suit. You asked for the will to be read. You did this." "I am your father," he screamed, grabbing the railing. "You can't let them take me." "Mr. Blackwood," the bailiff shouted. Moving in. I stood up. I didn't back away. I leaned forward, looking him right in the eye. "You are right," I said. "You are my father, and Grandpa Walter was your father. You didn't care about destroying his legacy. Why should I care about saving yours?" "Athena, please," he sobbed. "I have nothing. The house is leveraged. The accounts are empty. Tessa will leave me." I glanced at Tessa. She was already gathering her purse. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the exit. He was right about that. "Then you better learn how to budget," I said. "Grandpa taught me. It is a useful skill." "Order." Judge Harrison banged his gavel. The sound was final. "The court rules in favor of the defendant. The will is valid. The estate is awarded to Athena Blackwood. And the bailiff is instructed to take possession of Exhibit A and transfer it to the district attorney's office immediately." "No!" Gregory wailed, as the bailiff took the red envelope from the judge's bench. Two uniformed officers stepped into the back of the courtroom. They weren't there for crowd control. They were waiting for the evidence. Gregory slumped against the railing. He covered his face with his hands. He was weeping. But it wasn't the grief of a son. It was the terrified weeping of a man who realized the walls were finally closing in. Lila Grant closed her folder. She turned to me and smiled. It wasn't a shark smile this time. It was genuine. "It is over, Athena," she said. "You are free." I looked around the courtroom. I saw the judge stepping down. I saw Tessa slipping out the back door without looking back. I saw my father being spoken to by his lawyer, who looked like he was resigning on the spot. I picked up my purse. I picked up the old notebook of Walter's that I had brought with me for luck. I walked down the aisle. I didn't look at Gregory as I passed him. I didn't feel the need to say anything else. The verdict had said it all. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse and stepped out into the afternoon sun. The storm had passed. The air smelled of rain and wet asphalt, but it was fresh. I walked to the parking lot and unlocked my car, the sensible sedan Walter had helped me pick out 3 years ago. I sat in the driver's seat and put the key in the ignition, but I didn't start the engine. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty, but in my mind, I could see him there. I could see Walter in his plaid shirt, holding his coffee thermos, smiling that quiet, stoic smile. He had known that Gregory would try to devour me, and he had spent his final years not just saving money, but building a fortress. He had crafted a legal bear trap, baited it with Gregory's own greed, and waited for nature to take its course. I touched the dashboard. "You didn't just leave me the money, did you?" I whispered, tears blurring my vision again. "You knew the money wouldn't be enough. You knew I would need permission to let go." He hadn't just given me an inheritance. He had given me a severance package from my own toxic family. He had made it legally impossible for me to be my father's victim ever again. "Thank you," I said to the empty car. "Thank you for the escape." I started the engine. I had a house to go to. I had a job to do. And for the first time in 29 years, I had a life that belonged entirely, undeniably, to me. I drove out of the lot, leaving the courthouse and my father in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to Athena's story. It is a reminder that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who prepare us for the battles we don't even know are coming. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Walter's last line strategy. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please subscribe to the Veronica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. See you in the next one.